Good morning, everyone. Today I'm going to continue with the part 3 of child abuse and neglect. And these are the contents which includes myths and facts about CACN, guidelines for the identification of child abuse, communication, examination, documentation, and reporting, the laws and acts, the impact of the COVID-19 on CACN, role of a dentist, and some case reports. I would like to start with the quote: sometimes real superheroes live in the hearts of small children fighting big battles. So, the various myths and facts about the child abuse and neglect are the first one is that it is a myth that it's only abuse if it is violent. Whereas the fact is, physical abuse is just one type of child abuse, as we have discussed the other types of child abuse and neglect as well. Another myth is only bad people abuse their children, whereas this is not true because there are certain conditions in which the parents may be dealing with some mental health issues or the substance abuse problems. Another myth is abuse doesn't happen in good families, whereas various studies have been shown that even in the good families, the child abuse reports are there. The most child abusers are strangers, whereas the fact is most of this child abuse happens within the family members or with the people who are close to the family. Another myth about child abuse is that abused children always grow up to be abusers, which may be true for some people, but there is a strong motivation also among those who have suffered abuse to protect the other children against the same. Now, I would like to start with the guidelines for the identification. The presence of any unusual dressing, like wearing the full sleeve clothes in the summers to hide the scars and the marks, the gross physical examination of the child, any bruises in specific shapes related to the marks of specific object like belts or stick or anything, the presence of any bite marks, frenal tears, the bruising and petechiae of the soft palate, femur fractures, handprints, that is the mark of the fingerprints on the face or any other body parts, and strangulation marks seen in the children. Now, communication, examination, documentation, and reporting of the child abuse and neglect. First of all, we should help the child to talk and clarify what they have suffered and carry out the detailed investigations to confirm that it is a case of child abuse or neglect. Interview the child and parent separately because there are chances that the parent may be the abuser and the child will not be comfortable speaking in front of them. Examination should be done in a methodical way. Confirm in suspected cases and report them. For examination and documentation, full cutaneous examination should be done. Clear and thorough documentation of the medical findings should be noted down. Obtain as many as details of the injury or event as possible by asking the parents as well as the child. Talk to the child alone so that they are more comfortable if they are not comfortable in front of the parents. Measure and document each finding, including its location, size, shape, and color. For documentation, photographs, if possible, should be taken and recorded. Physical examination and medical history should be complete and in objective manner. Record any abnormal behavior in the child if the child gets scared seeing the parent or a specific person or while talking about a specific subject. Then that should also be recorded. Report to the child protective agencies should be done. Uh, as we cannot directly tell the parents that we are suspecting the child abuse, therefore, we should tell them by saying that based on my training, I am concerned that this injury could not have been happened this way, the way you are telling. And because of this, I am required by the law to make the report to Child Protective Services. Now, starting with the child protection, uh, these are some acts and laws which are given by various governments for protection of child. First one is the Dental Professional Against Violence, which was given by Californian Dental Association in 2001, and both train the trainer and direct provider training programs are given in this. They assist the dental professionals and their teams in recognizing and responding to the child abuse and neglect cases. PANDA, that is Prevent Abuse and Neglect through the Dental Awareness Program. It is to educate the professional and the dental auxiliaries about the child abuse and neglect, recognition, reporting, and prevention of the same. The identification of the high-risk families in antenatal and perinatal period. The preventive and supportive measures for the parents are given in this act. The education for the parents, counseling during the pregnancy of both the parents, and measures to reduce the stress in the families. Another act by National Plan of Action for the Children, which was formulated by Department of Women and Child Development in 2005. It is monitored by the Prime Minister Office and it ensures all the rights to the children are maintained up to 18 years of age, and it creates an enabling an environment to ensure the protection of the child. The guidelines principles of NPAC are to regard child as an asset and a person with human rights, and to ensure that they are given all the human rights to address the issues of the discrimination among the children based on the gender or the age, to accord the utmost priority of the children. Now there is a commission, National Commission for Protection of Child's Rights by Government of India, and it emphasizes the principle of universality and inviolability of child rights and recognizes the tone of urgency in all the child related policies of the country. And for this they have given a child helpline number also, which is 1098, and all the kind of child abuses and neglects can be reported to this. And for this commission, the protection of children in the 0 to 18 age group is of equal importance, and they have given different policies which define the priority actions for the most vulnerable children. The acts related to the children passed by Indian government are Commission for Protection of Child Rights in 2005, Right of Children to Free and Compulsory Education Act in 2009, Protection of Children from the Sexual Offences Rules in 2012, the Juvenile Justice Act in 2000, Child Labour Act in 1986, the Guardians and Wards Act in 1890, National Food Security Act in 2013, Prohibition of the Child Marriage Act in 2006, and Prenatal Diagnostic Techniques Act in 1994. These are the various acts passed by the Indian government to protect the child against the child abuse and neglect. The Protection of Child from the Sexual Offences, that is POXCO Act in 2012, and it is developed by the Ministry of Women and Child Development for the introduction of protection of child from the sexual offences, and the midday meal scheme, which is providing the children with the food in the school so that they do not suffer the nutritional neglect. The POXCO also has a helpline through which the online complaints can be registered by the parents or by the reporter who sees a child abuse and neglect in the nearby. This is the site by Gujarat government, that is Gujarat State Commission for Protection of Child Rights. And through this also the complaints in the Gujarat state can be registered. They have given the on the site itself that the complaints can be registered by logging in on this site. And they also have an application as well as the contact numbers through which the complaints can be registered. The Railways SOP, since the large number of children come in the Indian Railways are abundant, traffic, homeless, and even the children who run away from homes are found on the railway stations. Therefore, the Ministry of Railway and Ministry of Women and Child Welfare Development decided to come together to combat this problem. And in 2005, they have given this, 2015, they have given this SOP, that is Standard Operating Procedure, for the railways to ensure the care and protection of the children. Now one article on the child dental neglect law, specifications and repercussions for the dentist in 51 jurisdictions by Burgett et al. And the results of this study show that all jurisdictions have child neglect laws. However, only 8 specify failing to seek dental treatment as a child neglect, and none adopt the AAPD definitions of the child dental neglect. Although all the jurisdictions protect the dental professionals who report the child dental neglect in good faith, sanctions for failing to report neglect includes the imprisonment from 6 months through 5 years and fine from $1,000 to $10,000. Thus, the study concluded that although the laws vary across the jurisdiction, that dentists are protected when reporting the child dental neglect, but can be sanctioned for failing to report it. And therefore, the dentist may not be aware of the current sanctions or the interjurisdictional differences. Becoming informed about these laws may incentivize the dentist to establish reporting protocols for the child dental neglect. Now, the impacts of the COVID-19 on child abuse. As we have all must have seen these headlines in the various social medias or the newspapers, that there is an increase in the surge of the child abuse during the pandemic period, that is mostly during the lockdown period. There are various reasons which I will be describing. The parental burnout and the child maltreatment during the COVID-19 pandemic by Griffith et al. And they have suggested that the novel coronavirus has spread across the US, resulting in the significant changes in the daily aspects of the life. And therefore, these changes place parents at increased risk of the parental burnout, which is a chronic condition resulting from the high level of parenting related stress due to the mismatch between the demands of the parenting and resources available to the parents to meet those demands. This may be due to staying at home for longer periods, and even working from home is also a reason for this, and the economical changes in the families during the pandemic period. And therefore, this research suggested that parents who experience burnout are more likely to engage in child abuse and neglect, placing children at risk for detrimental short and long-term outcomes. The non-accidental injuries in the children at the time of COVID-19 period by Baird et al. Published in 2020. And the risk factors which they have highlighted are the social isolation, lack of early warning systems, loss of support systems, low income and financial uncertainty, lack of access to the healthcare and healthcare systems under stress. They have presented various examinations through which we can see if it is a case of child abuse or neglect. Like in history, the delay of presentation, inconsistencies, lack of overt trauma, children less than 3 years old, and a child with additional needs, that is with special healthcare needs, the lack of medical condition which predisposes to the bone fragility. For the examination, if the child looks well or behaving appropriately, and if the caregivers are behaving appropriately, presence of any bruises or burns or any injuries to the child, the radiological findings could be multiple fractures, which may include the skull fracture, rib fracture, humeral, femoral fractures, or subdural hemorrhages. Thus, the study concluded that the non-accidental injury is the tragic outcome of a complex interplay between the individual, relationship, community, and the society. And the COVID-19 will not only compound this, it must be a diagnosis which we seek to actively dismiss to safeguard the children under our care, as it is a failure to recognize the abuse that often leads to child's demise. Another article, Children Behind Closed Doors Due to COVID-19 Isolation, Abuse, Neglect and Domestic Violence by Depek et al. And they have suggested that abuse and neglect of children is a public health issue at the global level with significant rates of morbidity and mortality. The actual circumstances of the health crisis generate and aggravate a series of risk factors for the child abuse and neglect at the level of the child and parent characteristics, family dynamics, and wider social environment. The isolation and quarantine, possibly leading to the social exclusion, represent a serious risk for the child abuse and neglect. Now, by the Alliance for the Child Protection in Humanitarian Action, they have suggested that in a circle, the child lies in the innermost circle, that is forms the core of the society, and therefore they are at the high risk of child abuse, neglect, violence, exploitation, psychological distress, and negative impact due to the COVID-19 period. They have presented various risks which are seen and the causes of those risks which could be seen during the COVID-19 period. First of all, the physical and emotional maltreatment, which the risk present could be reduced supervision and neglect of the children, which could be due to closure of the schools, continued work for the parents and the caregivers, the increased in child abuse and domestic interpersonal violence because of the increased psychosocial distress among the caregivers, poisoning and other danger and risk of injuries to the children because of the availability and misuse of the toxic disinfectants and alcohols, the pressure on or lack of access to the child protection services because of the increased obstacles to reporting the incidents. Because the focus is on COVID-19, therefore these measures may be neglected by the society. The child protection risk for the mental and psychological distress, the risk could be distress of the children due to the death, illness or separation of a loved one, or fear of the disease because of the increased stress level due to the isolation, worsening of the pre-existing mental health conditions because the caregivers with the pre-existing mental health condition may not be able to access the usual supports, the pressure on or lack of access to the MHPSS services because of the quarantine measures can create the fear and panic to the community, and therefore there is lack of access to the services. The risk on the child labor, there is an increased engagement of the children in the hazardous or exploitative labor because of the loss or reduction in the household income and opportunity or expectation to work due to school closure. The accompanied and separated children, the risk for them could be separation because of the loss of parents due to the disease, or becoming accompanied of or the child head of the household because of the quarantine of the caregivers due to the disease, and being placed in the institutions so that they are quarantined or self-isolated in the non-affected areas. The social exclusion risk may include the social stigmatization of the infected individuals or the individuals groups to be suspected infected because of the social and racial discrimination of the individuals who are affected. Increased risk for the children living on the street, and other children are already at risk because of the disappropriate impact of the COVID-19, the increased risk or limited support to the children in the conflict with the law because has been closure of the basic services like law and legislature. Now they have given certain priority child protection actions also. The individual and group activities for the child well-being. For this, they have given the consultation with the others, identify the alternative mental health and psychosocial support and educational activities for the children. For this, train the health, education, and child services and the MHPSS staff on the COVID-19 related risk. The strengthening family and caregiving environments. For this, work with the children, caregivers, and other stakeholders to understand the cultural beliefs and practices that could protect the child. Identify the awareness, raising the opportunities to highlight the importance of the parent-child relationship, and develop an interagency plan. For the community level approaches, identify what the role communities can play in raising the awareness, and work with the communities to identify the strategies to prevent and protect the vulnerable groups. Now the case managements in the for the child abuse and neglect during the COVID-19 period. The training should be provided and support to the caseworkers and existing helpline, child helplines on the COVID-19 for the basic facts and myths and impact, and they should be trained about the child health abuse and neglect, and identify the risk mitigation measures for the caseworkers and alternative methods for the follow-up if the home visits are impossible at this period. And alternative care programs should be identify, train, and mentor the local health actors in preventing the family separation and identifying the children who are at high risk. Identify and train the persons across the communities who are placed in COVID-19 duties, and build the capacity of the system to prevent the separation, engage in family tracing and reunification, and provide family-based alternative care. Now, by the International Society for Prevention of Child Abuse and Neglect, they have given certain multi-sectorial interventions during the COVID-19 period for the protection of the child. They are working in collaboration with the World Health Organization, CDC, the Alliance for Child Protection in Humanitarian Action, UNICEF, and the End Violence Against Child like NGOs. And they have given the interventions like standard procedures for documenting and referring the child's cases that may need follow-up, clear the protocols to prevent the family separation, reduce the stigma and social exclusion that may result from the disease, clear, coordinated, child-friendly community messaging on the children's unique risks and vulnerabilities related to the outbreak. And they have also given certain guidelines, which includes train, health, and educate the child services staff, train the first responders on how to manage the disclosure of the gender-biased violence, increase the information sharing on the referral and other support services available for the children, engage the children in accessing how COVID-19 affects them differently, provide the targeted support to the interim care centers and the families, provide financial support to them, and put a place concrete measures to prevent the child family separation, and ensure the protection of all child is given at the utmost concentration in the disease control measures. Now, the role of the dentist, as I have already explained, that 1098 is a helpline number through which the child abuse and neglect can be reported even by a dentist. And the major role of a dentist could be observe and examine any suspicious evidence, treat the dental injuries which could be seen, hold the child whose life is in danger, and transfer them to the hospital for the proper care if we see any child abuse or neglect. The proper documentation with accurate and reproducible records, which includes the written observations, photographs, radiographs, and the cast models. The child abuse is suspected and reported. Multidisciplinary team of institution initiates the screening process, and the pedodontist can contribute towards the prevention as well as identification of the cases. The prevention could be at different levels, that is at the primary level, secondary, or the tertiary level. Starting with the primary level, its approaches should be for a population in general without targeting a particular high-risk group, screening the children at the high risk of the maltreatment, and the parents who are at risk for abusing the children, like the parents having the mental disorders or having any drug abuse history. The comprehensive evaluation of the child and family situation. At the secondary level, that is examination and evaluation of all the individuals at high risk, the pedodontist can recognize his limitations and assume responsibilities for applying an interdisciplinary approach, and they may provide the adequate care to the children, enhance the parenting capabilities. At the tertiary level, the prevention is considered as a goal to prevent the recurrence of the condition, and the child should be referred to the child agencies for further protection. If the practitioner is concerned about safety of a particular child, then they should discuss it with a senior colleague or as they think are appropriate. And if they are still concerned, then they should check with the information sharing index, and then they should refer to the local authorities within 48 hours in writing or through the phone calls. And then the social worker may acknowledge the receipt of referral and decide for the next course of action. And after this, they may initial assessment may be required by the dentist, and concerns about the child immediate safety is then taken care of. And if the social worker may give the feedback to the referrer for the next course of action, and they may take off the case further. And if there are no longer concerns, then no further child protection action has to be taken, whereas the services which the child requires should be given out. Now, one article on reporting the child maltreatment, dentistry's ethical responsibility by Jesse et al. In 2000. And they have described the initial steps in prevention of the child maltreatment are early recognition and reporting. And the reporting laws were not made to punish offenders, rather to help the children who are in need. And the statistics in this study indicate that among the previously abused children who were returned home without the intervention, 5% of them were either killed and 25% were seriously re-injured by the same abuser. The dental profession must take a more active role on behalf of the children in the prevention of this problem. And as a dentist, we have the moral, ethical, and legally mandated responsibility to help protect this right through the recognition and report of the child abuse and neglect. The child abuse and the role of dentist in its identification, prevention, and protection. A literature review by Singh et al. They have this review also makes a certain recommendations by which the dentist and the healthcare providers in general can be better prepared themselves for such cases. And they have given that a responsible dental team should follow 4 R's, that is recognize, record, report, and refer when it comes to a child abuse. They have given these guidelines like a gross assessment of the child should begin as soon as they walk in the clinic. Interview should be conducted in the presence of a witness, and the parents should preferable be questioned separately, parent and the child. And open-ended, non-threatening, descriptive questions should be asked. The interviewer should be objective and not attempt to prove the abuse. Any discrepancies in the child and parent's description should be noted down. And if there are any signs of abuse and the dentist feels that the parent might try to leave the clinic with their children, then they should inform the concerned authority first and then tell parent about the same. And they have also given certain guidelines for training the healthcare providers, that is provision of the courses on child abuse identification and reporting in the UG and PG dental curriculum, increasing the exposure of dental graduate to cases, introduction of certificate courses on this, programs on the line of prevent abuse and neglect through the dental awareness scheme. And medical providers with the expertise in this area should make themselves available to the dentist and dental organizations for consultation and education. Now, the acknowledgement of and awareness of child abuse and neglect in the dentist perspective by Johar et al. And they have said that the dentist should examine and document these findings, that is lip laceration, trauma, scars due to trauma, rope marks on the corner of the mouth, the palate, unexplained bruises and petechiae, particularly at the junction of the hard and soft palate, floor of the mouth for the contusions, tooth fractures, poor oral health hygiene, displaced or any other missing teeth due to unexplained reasons, labial frenum lacerated from force feeding or from blunt trauma, the scars on the tongue or any abnormal mobility from the repeated trauma. Oral mucosa should be checked for the excessive salivation, difficulty in swallowing, and burns should also be checked due to any chemicals or liquids which may appear white slough from the necrotic epithelium. The approaches they have described to tackle the victims of the child abuse are identify the cause and enhance the parental awareness by educating them. Treatment should be given for the underlying injuries and the disease. Motivate the child to live his life in good and fearless manner. Encourage the community to help in identifying and reporting the case. Intervention should encompass the synchronization among the police, courts, counselors, doctors, and the social workers, and services need to be flexible. The mandatory reporting of child physical abuse and dental neglect by the Australian dentist by Sarkar et al. In 2020. The key points in this article are there are complex non-uniform reporting legislation concerning the Australian dentist in the area of child abuse and neglect. And there is a significant gap in literature of abusive orofacial injuries in the Australian children. The global literature shows frequent occurrence of the abusive injuries and the dental neglect in the orofacial region, and therefore the review indicates that the dental practice responses to child abuse and neglect by the Australian dentist is not optimized. Reporting the child abuse cases by the dentist working in the UAE by Al Ahmad et al. They have reported that 25% of the dentists encountered a case suspicious of the child abuse. However, majority of them were not reported to the authorities. The fear of making the wrong diagnosis was the most common reason for not reporting these cases. Therefore, they suggested that training is needed to build the dentist's capacity to diagnose and report the child abuse. The child maltreatment cross-sectional survey of the general dentist by Kaur et al. And the overall response in this study was for the questionnaire was 97%. However, the lack of reporting was seen in 55% dentists, and the reasons were they were hesitant to report the cases. There were no significant difference between the male or the female dentist regarding the reason for the hesitancy to report the cases. The results of this study show that although the respondent dentists were aware of the diagnosis of the child abuse, they were hesitant and unaware of the appropriate authority to report, and therefore they concluded that increased instruction in the area of recognition and reporting of the child abuse and neglect should be emphasized. The assessment and knowledge and attitudes of dental students in regard to child abuse in the Turkey by Bodrumlu et al. The results in this questionnaire were 100% responses. About 68% of the third year students, 40% of the final year students, and 16% of the interns believed that they could detect the child abuse cases. However, the results indicated a major lack of knowledge social indicators, sign of physical abuse, and reporting procedures among all the respondents. However, the intern students had the highest rate of correct responses, and most of the students wanted to receive more knowledge about this topic. Therefore, the study concluded that dental students in the Turkey are not sufficiently prepared for their role in diagnosing the suspected cases of the child abuse. The knowledge and awareness of child abuse and neglect among the children in Pondicherry by Stephen et al. The results of this study showed that majority of the children were aware of the acts constituting the child abuse and neglect. A positive correlation was seen between the age of the children and awareness, and furthermore, the girls had better knowledge about that as compared to the boys. Therefore, the study concluded that although the children had the good knowledge about CAN, further studies have to be conducted to generalize the findings in the Pondicherry district. The dentist as a child abuse informer, a case report. This is a case report of a 9-year-old female child who reported to the pediatric dental clinic of a private university in Brazil for the treatment. And the patient was reported to have lived with her father, stepmother, and 3 brothers. And the mother was alcohol dependent, and she abandoned the child when she was a baby. On the intraoral examination of the child, it revealed 5 carious lesions in the dentine of the deciduous molars, and the patient always used to attend the dental treatment with her paternal aunt. And while noticing the behavior of the girl, they noticed that she was shy, withdrawn child with a sad shy look, and did not interact with the dental team. These were the clinical findings which were seen on that girl. That is hematoma on the left orbital. They were burning with the laceration of the epithelial on the left hand, and burning on the lips with the loss of epithelium. When asked about the injuries happened to the child, first she reported that she had fallen from the school ladder. After a few minutes, she said that she was kicked by her brother. And when the dentist was not convinced by the answers, they approached a pediatric dentist to talk to the child. And using the behavior guidance technique, when the pediatric dentist inquired about the injuries, the girl felt confident and willing to report that one day her stepmother had beaten and burned her with a hot spoon, while the father was unaware about the situation. After the victim's report, her aunt was questioned by the dentist for the same, and she was aware of the lesions, but she had no knowledge how they happened. Therefore, the coordinator explained the mistreatment and requested the presence of a social worker who advised the aunt to seek the guardianship council immediately and make a complaint against the same. And later on, the judge decided to take the necessary measures to transfer the child's custody to the paternal grandmother. And it has been emphasized that during the testimony of the pediatric dentist was essential for the final decision. When the child returned for the further dental treatments later on, it was possible to observe her changes in the behavior as she was more expressive, talkative, happy, and quite participative during the further visits. Another case report, the diagnosis of the child abuse in a pediatric dentistry, a case report by Tamara et al. This is a case report of a 5-year-old who reported to the Department of Pediatric Dentistry to have her teeth treated. And during the physical examination, the patient reported during the physical examination, the bruising were noted around the upper lip of the child. And the girl later on confessed that she was forcefully kissed by a drunk neighbor, which resulted in the lip discoloration. And on taking the history of the patient, it was also noted that she also had a disturbed family history, and which could be a possible reason for the for the neglect in this girl. And following an appropriate conduct procedure, the dentist informed the police, who initiated the explanatory proceedings in this case. Thus, I would like to conclude by saying that with any instance of suspected abuse, it is crucial to involve the professionals with the experience in dealing with the child maltreatment. Many medical centers now have child protective services teams that include the pediatrician as well as the periodontist with the training in child protection, psychologists, social workers, and law enforcement agents to protect the children against the child abuse and neglect. Therefore, the interdisciplinary approach of such a team allows for a thorough assessment of the child and their family. And we being the periodontist, should play the appropriate role in recognizing and reporting such cases. Never remain silent if you suspect someone is being abused. So speak up, as your actions may save a life of a child. Thank you.